Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This episode is brought to you by load shedding. That's why the picture is all weird. So, if you can, please click that like button to generate some extra electricity so I can get some more lights. Also, if you can, comment a light bulb down below, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Anyways, onto the story. What Was Not Burnt, written by Dark Prince 010. While some may have thought it cruel, Daras was privately glad the child's suffering had come to an end. His compatriot, a human with the jutting, consonant-heavy and difficult-to-pronounce name of Mark, had informed the large alien of a regular basis about updates of their upcoming child. First had been ultrasonic pictures, ones the humans had cleverly designed to read the reflections and construct a 3D image based on that. The shape was small, mushed, and somewhat indistinct, but as far as he could at least see, bore a broad resemblance to human facial characteristics. It wasn't an especially intuitive body morphology. Daras's own species were more quadrupedal and furred on the lower half, leading up to a torso and a pair of dexterous arms near their head. Mark had once said that he looked like a cat centaur, words that Daras had to look up on a cultural reference database before tentatively agreeing that there was indeed some resemblance to the two Earth species. But then had come the pictures of diagnostic readouts, tissue samples stained vivid pinks and blues and purple, with dark clusters where the doctors had said there should be clear. Mark had asked him to help cover shifts when he had to travel to the fetal oncology department. Each time he came back looking more and more broken and shattered, the odds dwindling and whittling into lower and lower forecasts. Finally, after agonizing months, the due date arrived, and Mark's child was induced. Daras then visited, and despite the difference in the two species, he could tell that the infant was not well. Some deeper instinct of his telling him that the twitching form he saw before him, wailing in agony and spasming with pain, was not one that would last to see their first solar orbit. He had agreed without hesitation to continue covering for Mark's absences, even as a large part of his soul raged and sought to fight the cruelties of fate that dictated these circumstances, and tenfold further fury at the uncaring universe after hearing Mark's hushed words, "In any case, I think I'll probably be back sooner than I wanted anyways." So, the news of the child's passing was not a surprise, but a relief. Even something in the way Mark said that they had passed on echoed the feeling that death was far preferable to the suffering the child had been enduring. Daras could also emphasize with the human's pain. His own middle-born child had been out playing amongst the tall grass when they were on a recreation trip nearly a decade ago now, and had stumbled into a hexball wasp nest. The palm-sized insects had stung them dozens of times, and the nearest clinics did not have the antivenom on hand. He had held his convulsing child in his arms and felt them go still, even as the shuttlecraft had raced to the distinct metropolitan hospital. It had been a dark time in Terrace's life. A black period marked by the burial of his lost offspring, and then the traditional incineration of their garments, toys, and other items that brought to mind the memory of the loss. Some other cultures had commented on the practice of memory pyres, as they were called, as being a somewhat extreme reaction, but Daras had felt the mere material objects were a small price to pay for easing the suffering of those who carried on, meaning that it was easier for him to remember and mourn his child on his own terms, rather than having something dredging up a memory and rudely thrusting it upon him at the unexpected moment. A month passed, and Mark's return to the work center, a weight still visible on his shoulders, one that Daras knew from experience likely linger there for years to come. But he did appear to brighten when he saw Daras, and the large alien was somewhat taken aback by how outgoing Mark was, given the immense loss that he had just suffered. "Hey, Daras, it's good to see you," he said. The alien simply gave him a nod in acknowledgement, curious why the human had initiated the conversation. "Hey, am I remembering right that your family is expecting a little cub here in a few weeks?" Stunned, Daras nodded again, but he couldn't help but let his jaw hang open in surprise. He was indeed excited for the birth of his newest child, but had not spoken of it to Mark hardly at all, not wanting to overshadow his grief and try to replace it with someone else's joy. But upon seeing the nod, Mark let out a slight breath and said, "Excellent. Glad I remember that right. In that case, I've got something for you." He led the alien back to his transportation vehicle, a mid-sized hover van with the still visible adhesive smears of removed stickers from the back window. Popping open the hatch of the rear, Mark said, "These are for you and your family," he chuckled. "They were a little bit difficult for me to wrangle into the car, but I think you'll be able to manage them handily." Indeed, each of the boxes was fully the size of Mark's torso, if not slightly larger. But Darius's enormous size would allow him to carry 2 of each of the crates under each arm. Mark hesitated for a moment, long enough that the alien noticed before the human reached out and, with a deep breath, opened the closest of the containers. Darius stared in amazement, still struggling to comprehend what was happening, as Mark pulled out a garment. It was made of 2 distinct fabric prints, approximately the same hue of colors, but one bearing a fanciful and simplified images of spaceships, while the other depicted some sort of enormous scaled creature with sharp fangs, and human lettering across the pattern with simply the repeated and nonsensical word, "Raw." The 2 had been stitched together. One of them was cut at where the waist would have been on the original garment, to form what Darius was realizing would be approximately appropriate-sized onesies for his newborn. His species was far larger than humans, and so, even though this was meant for a yearling human, it would likely fit his newborn for only a few weeks, a month or 2 at most. But still, he stared as he realized that each of these containers contained similar garments. One of them that Mark opened contained not garments, but protective textiles, coats that had been similarly modified to provide resistance to wind and rain and chill, and a dozen pairs of baby shoes never worn and still marked with a sales tag. After opening each of the closest and presenting it to Theros, who was still staring dumbstruck, Mark stepped back, taking a long, shuddering breath. Theros looked to the human and said, But why? Why would you keep this, instead of destroying reminders of such loss?" The alien looked at the meaningful gifts surrounding him. "Why would you give me this? If you wish to come visit my dwelling, do you not risk seeing my own offspring wearing that which was meant for yours?" Mark nodded, wiping the corner of his eye with his sleeve as he said, "I suppose that's the risk we'll have to take, but you'd get better use out of it than we would." "But what of your grief?" Darius asked, struggling to imagine what it would be like to have the uncertainty weighing on you when unbidden memories would resurface. Mark gave him a small smile, patting his knee with his hand as he said, "My Abula once said that grief comes in waves. You can't always predict when they'll come, but surely as the tide comes in and out, the sharpness of pain will pass as well." Nodding to the crates of clothes, he said, "And these were meant to be things of joy. Seeing your little one running around in them will still give me joy. Truly, even if it's colored by grief." The alien slowly closed and gathered the crates towards them, but as they went to grab the last crate, he paused, for Mark had gently reached in, brushing aside some of the garments to pull out a particular outfit. The design and style of this one was markedly different from the others. Some differences in the way the textile was composed, but also with much more faded colors. A garment that Darius realized must be significantly older than all the others in the crates that he had seen thus far. He paused for a moment, letting Mark hold the onesie before the human pulled it close, almost cradling his head against it, before taking another long breath and smiling through tears as he handed it back to the alien. Darius took it gingerly, understanding that this was significant to the human, not quite understanding why. Noticing the hesitation, Mark said thickly, That was the first onesie my own birth parents had put me in when they returned from the hospital ward with me. It was given to my parents' birth parent by their own birth parent, something humans called a hand-me-down." He gently reached up to close Darius's hand around the clothing that sat tiny in his enormous palm. I figured it was time to pass it on and make sure it continues to be well-loved." Darius nodded, murmuring, "And so it shall be." Then he and Mark stood a while, watching the cluster of suns set on the cloudy horizon. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Asrigal. Thank you very much.